It is morning at Lapis Lazuli Academy when Tiara Rose is suddenly approached by her friends. They express how sad they are about graduation tomorrow, knowing they won't be able to see her as often anymore. With gentle confidence, Tiara Rose reassures them that she will always remain in the kingdom, and there will be many chances to meet as she is destined to become its queen. The girls immediately brighten and excitedly ask when she will marry Prince Heart Knights. Tiara Rose explains that after graduation, she will undergo a year of bridal training before finally marrying Heart Knights in a grand cathedral ceremony. She tells them that, as the future queen, she will do her best to live up to everyone's expectations. Afterwards, she heads to her classroom, where she spots Heart Knights inside. However, something feels off as his expression is unusually grim, making her wonder if something troubling has happened. Before she can approach him, Akari suddenly rushes in and throws herself into his arms. He catches her and his expression suddenly shifts to a fond one. Aware that Tiara Rose is watching, Akari turns and gives her a wicked smirk. Tiara Rose freezes, staring at the two of them in disbelief. At that moment, a flood of memories crashes into her. She suddenly remembers that she is not truly Tiara Rose, but an ordinary girl who loves playing Otomi games. In her previous life, she had cleared Heart Knight's route as the player character Akari. The shock is too much for her to handle. Overwhelmed by the realization, she faints on the spot. In her thoughts, she realizes that she is the villainess instead of the heroine. When she finally awakens, she finds herself lying in a clinic bed with Heart Knights seated beside her. He stiffly informs her that he has already arranged a carriage to take her home. Tiara Rose looks at him in surprise. She remembers that in the game, Heart Knights is the main love interest Akari must win over to achieve the best ending. However, his next words quickly shatter that illusion. Heart Knights coldly remarks that it is unusual for her to suddenly faint and asks if it was merely a ploy to get his attention due to her jealousy toward Akari. His detached tone makes Tiara Rose realize that the real Heart Knights is nothing like the kind and devoted character she remembered from the game. He then adds that although he is technically her fiancé, he will not be able to escort her to the graduation party. Tiara Rose stiffly accepts his apology, but once he leaves, her face turns pale. She knows how humiliating it will be to attend the party alone with her status. More importantly, she knows exactly what will happen next because she has already played this game countless times. Her mind drifts back to the story's premise, where Akari enrolled in the academy thanks to her rare and powerful magic known as the Holy Prayer. Eventually, Akari gains Heart Knight's attention, and once you start winning him over in the game, he begins showering Akari with affection. Tiara Rose recalls how their romance develops through a series of cutscenes, all leading to a happy ending with a grand cathedral wedding. As the carriage carries her back to her manor, Tiara Rose feels sick at the thought of having been reborn as the villainess. She knows that her character treated Akari harshly throughout the story, and that by the time of the graduation ball, she is meant to be condemned for her bullying. In the game, Akari wins while Tiara Rose is dragged away and her engagement to Heart Knights is publicly broken. She doesn't feel she has done anything especially cruel since becoming Tiara Rose, so she quietly hopes that things will not end as harshly as they did in the game. Still, she knows there is no happy ending waiting for her, and that she will never be chosen by anyone due to her reputation as a villainess. When she arrives at the manor, she is greeted by one of the maids, Fellini. As she steps inside, she is surprised to find her parents eagerly waiting for her return. They happily explain that they wanted to give her new accessories for her upcoming wedding and enjoy some sweets together before she begins her bridal training, which will start after the party. Her father, Schnaz, admits that he wants to enjoy more sweets with her because he will miss her dearly, but says he truly wants Tiara Rose to be happy with Heart Knights. Tiara Rose smiles at her parents, cherishing their kindness. From a young age, she had always known she would one day wear the crown, so she had trained her entire life for that role. Schnaz had been especially strict with her upbringing, determined to raise her into a capable and dignified lady. As a result, Tiara Rose herself became strict as well, often scolding Heart Knights whenever she felt he behaved inappropriately. Though it may have seemed harsh, she did it out of love, wanting him to become a better man worthy of the crown. Unfortunately, he never saw it that way, and instead came to view her as cruel. For a moment, she considers skipping the graduation party, but immediately scolds herself, since it would be disgraceful for someone of her status not to attend. So she decides to accept her fate for the sake of her parents. Elsewhere, Aquastide activates his magic, wishing for a different future for Tiara Rose. On the day of the graduation party, Tiara Rose's friends complain about Akari's behavior. They think she's being disrespectful for constantly staying by Heart Knight's side despite Tiara Rose's presence. They assure Tiara Rose that they will always remain by her side, and she thanks them for their loyalty. Once they leave her alone in the room, Tiara Rose begins to tremble. Fellini approaches her and suggests calling Schnaz to escort her, but Tiara Rose insists that she will be fine on her own. She doesn't want to trouble her father over this event, even though she understands Fellini's concern. Schnoz would surely be surprised if he saw her enter the party without an escort. Still worried, Fellini tries to cheer her up by wheeling a table full of sweets for her to enjoy. Tiara Rose's eyes light up at the sight. She takes a biscuit and immediately feels better. Remembering how she loved sweets and baking in her past life, she is thankful that her hobbies had carried over into her life as Tiara Rose. She smiles at the spread as Fellini admits that she simply wanted to make her smile before the party began. Just then, Akari rushes in to check on her, and the two girls exchange polite greetings. Tiara Rose observes Akari and notices how stunning she looks, dressed in a fine gown and luxurious jewelry, everything befitting the heroine of the game. Akari expresses how worried both she and Heart Knights were when Tiara Rose collapsed yesterday. Moments later, Heart Knights himself enters and walks over to them. Tiara Rose greets him politely as he explains Akari's concern for her well-being. He asks whether Tiara Rose still plans to attend the party. She confirms that she will, since she is feeling better, though she still has some preparations to finish. Understanding that she needs privacy, Heart Knights and Akari leave the room to head to the party as Tiara Rose prepares herself. A short while later, Tiara Rose stands before the grand doors leading to the party hall. She knows that once she steps inside, the condemnation event will finally begin. The guards open the doors and announce her arrival. Gasps ripple through the guests, surprised to see her enter alone, while Heart Knight stands at Akari's side, ready to start the event. Tiara Rose looks at the couple standing before her as Heart Knights begins his announcement, declaring that he's breaking off his engagement with her. Shaw's gasps and steps forward to protest, but stops when Tiara Rose quietly signals him to stay back. Forcing herself to remain composed, Tiara Rose asks Heart Knights for his reason, stating that she does not deserve to be humiliated in such a public manner. He scoffs at her ignorance, stating that she should know the reason herself. She meets his gaze and says that if he had intended to take another consort, he should have followed proper procedure instead of disgracing her before everyone. Heart Knights defends himself, accusing Tiara Rose of treating Akari cruelly after learning that she came from the countryside. Standing her ground, Tiara Rose replies that she was only strict with Akari because she was unfamiliar with the kingdom's laws and customs. She simply did her duty and thought she taught her their ways. Heart Knights counters that Tiara Rose did more than simply teach her. He accuses her of forcing Akari to kneel when greeting him and of stopping her from dancing with him at previous parties. Keeping her voice steady, Tiara Rose explains that it is customary for a prince to be bowed to. As for the dancing, she had intervened because Akari danced with him more than twice in a single night, a privilege reserved only for the crown prince's fiancé, which was supposed to be her. She coldly remarks that Heart Knights should know the rules of their own kingdom. Her words only anger him further, and he continues to hurl accusations at her. Tiara Rose realizes that no matter how reasonable she is destined to lose this confrontation. So instead of continuing to argue, she calmly states that she will allow the engagement to be broken, since Heart Knight's heart clearly belongs to Akari. Maintaining his authoritative demeanor, Heart Knights announces that his engagement with Tiara Rose is effectively broken, and that he is now engaged to Akari, who will be the new future queen. Tiara Rose tries to steady herself, telling herself that even if her heart is broken, she still has her family and friends. That fragile comfort shatters when Heart Knights declares that Tiara Rose will be banished from the kingdom for having harmed the future queen. Tiara Rose freezes. This punishment is far worse than what happened in the game. If she is banished, she will never see her family or friends again. She was prepared to lose, but she did not expect this kind of ending for herself. As despair threatens to swallow her whole, Aquasteed suddenly steps forward, telling Heart Knights that he has gone too far. Aquasteed confidently approaches her and asks if Tiara Rose is all right. She looks at him in surprise, but recognizes him at once as the crown prince of the kingdom of Marin Forest and the main love interest of the game's sequel. She remembers seeing his character design and instantly falling in love with him. Sadly, she never got the chance to play that game, as she had died before it was released. Aquasteed fixes her with a firm yet gentle gaze and tells her to stand tall, because she is the one in the right in this situation. Heart Knights protests that Tiara Rose must be punished, which only angers Aquasteed further. He declares that everything Heart Knights has said and done is far harsher than anything Tiara Rose has ever done. He sharply criticizes Heart Knights, saying that humiliating Tiara Rose at a celebratory event is disgraceful and unbecoming of a prince. Turning back to Tiara Rose, Aquasteed asks if her engagement has truly been dissolved. When she confirms it, he suddenly kneels before her and proposes, confessing that he has long wished to make her his wife. Tiara Rose is stunned by his sudden declaration. Noticing her shock, Aquasteed gently tells her that she is free to take her time. He then kisses her hand, leaving everyone in the room speechless. Tiara Rose smiles softly and thanks him for making her feel valued. No longer the center of attention, Akari steps forward in protest. She insists that Tiara Rose does not deserve a happy ending because of her supposed cruelty. Clutching Aquasteed's arm, she demands that he side with her. Tiara Rose urgently warns Akari not to touch a prince of a neighboring kingdom so casually, but Akari refuses to listen. Aquasteed pulls his arm away and gives Tiara Rose a small smile for her consideration. Then he turns a cold glare on Akari and declares that she has disrespected him by overstepping her bounds, ordering her to be removed at once. Akari is dragged out of the hall, stunning everyone present. Aquasteed returns his attention to Tiara Rose, apologizing for the disturbance and promising that he will always come to her rescue. Tiara Rose gazes at him in disbelief. With Aquasteed's involvement, the story has already changed, and now she has no idea what the future will hold. During the carriage ride back to her home, Tiara Rose couldn't help but reflect on everything that had just happened. Only moments ago, her engagement had been broken off, and she was supposed to receive the game's bad ending. Yet Aquasteed's sudden appearance had changed everything. His proposal still left her in shock, as she could hardly fathom how the main character of the sequel game could fall in love with the villainess. She steals a brief glance at him, and when he notices, his smile softens even more. Embarrassed, she quickly looks away and apologizes. Tiara Rose admits that she is still surprised Aquasteed would ask her to be his consort when there are so many noble ladies vying for his attention. Her words seem to brighten him. He gently asks if he may allow himself to hope. She then remembers that this is not actually the first time they have met. In fact, they had been classmates the year before, though they never had many opportunities to speak. Aquasteed looks thoughtful as he confesses that she had always intrigued him. He recalls watching her from afar whenever she read outside, often accompanied by Fellini, secretly enjoying sweets while absorbed in a novel. He found it endearing how her expressions would change with every page. He even admits that whenever he saw her cry, he felt an overwhelming urge to hold her. Tiara Rose hides her face in embarrassment. Aquasteed gently asks her not to hide from him and apologizes if his actions seemed like spying. He explains that he simply couldn't help himself as his feelings for her slowly deepened. However, knowing she was Heart Knight's fiancé, he never tried to take her away. Instead, he left the country to continue his studies, hoping distance would help him forget her. When he returned for the graduation ball, Heart Knight's announcement shocked him. Realizing the opportunity before him, Aquasteed decided he could no longer remain silent. Tiara Rose thanks him sincerely. In that painful moment, she had felt utterly alone, and his intervention gave her reassurance and strength. Aquasteed admits that even he was surprised by the severity of the punishment announced. Gently gathering a strand of her hair, he presses a soft kiss to it and tells her that if she had truly been banished, he would have taken her away with him without hesitation. Blushing, she admits that it is still hard to believe how deeply he seems to care for her. Aquasteed smiles and assures her that he is serious, then leans in and gently kisses her forehead. When he pulls away, he says he wishes their carriage ride could have lasted longer. He helps her down from the carriage and before leaving, asks her out on a date. Tiara Rose happily agrees, and Aquasteed promises to pick her up in 3 days. Inside the manor, Tiara Rose finds Schnoz fuming over Heart Knights, angry at the humiliation he caused and the disrespect he showed her. Her parents then ask how she plans to respond to Aquasteed's proposal. With her engagement to Heart Knights now broken, marrying Aquasteed is a real possibility, especially since he formally proposed. Tiara Rose lowers her gaze and says that Aquasteed is far too good for her, quietly telling herself that a villainess does not deserve such a happy ending. The next day, Heart Knights attempts to visit Akari, but the guard initially refuses him entry. He insists that he only wishes to confirm something with her, as the events of the previous night left him unsettled. Eventually allowed inside, he is greeted by an overjoyed Akari. She stands to welcome him and complains about how bored she has been since she is no longer permitted to leave. Heart Knights is unsettled by how little she seems to have reflected on what happened. Akari expresses her shock over Aquasteed's sudden proposal and voicing her concern that Aquasteed may be deceiving Tiara Rose. Heart Knights asks whether Tiara Rose had truly done anything wrong. Akari feigns innocence, claiming she was bullied by Tiara Rose, but endured it because Heart Knights was always by her side. When she reaches out to hug him, Heart Knights immediately pushes her away. Confused, Akari assumes Tiara Rose must have said something to him, but he replies that he has not seen her since the party. Akari wonders why Tiara Rose is still part of the story. In her mind, Tiara Rose's role should have ended after the graduation ball. Akari decides to change her approach and asks Heart Knights to cut her punishment short. When she brings up Aquasteed, Heart Knights grows suspicious. Akari insists that she only wishes to save him, arguing that Aquasteed knows nothing about Tiara Rose's true nature. Before Heartmites can respond, a guard returns to inform him that his visitation time is over. Heartmites leaves the room without a word as Akari desperately begs him to stay. Once outside, doubt settles in his chest. For the first time, he wonders if he has made a mistake that can never be undone. Elsewhere, Tiara Rose lies alone in her room, pondering what her future may hold. She knows little about the sequel game, and that uncertainty frightens her. She worries that the true heroine might eventually appear and that, following the original plot, Aquasteed could be swayed by her charm. A soft tap from a stone against her window pulls her from her thoughts. When she looks outside, she is surprised to find Aquasteed standing below, smiling up at her and remarking on how beautiful the moon is tonight. In one smooth motion, he jumps on her balcony and asks if she knows about the Fairy Star Festival, explaining that he wishes to attend it with her. Tiara Rose remembers the Fairy Star Festival as an in-game event where the player attends with the character they are closest to. She tells Aquasteed that the festival is not usually held at this time of year. Undeterred, Aquasteed activates his magic, calling upon the fairies. Noticing her shiver, Aquasteed drapes his coat over her shoulders, insisting he is fine despite her concern. As they take in the cool night air and glowing lights, Aquasteed is suddenly overcome with happiness. He leans closer to her and admits that spending time with her brings him so much joy that it almost feels frightening. Tiara Rose blushes deeply, but her thoughts are interrupted when Aquasteed gently tells her to look up. With no clouds hindering their view, they see a breathtaking sky filled with countless stars, and even a few shooting across the heavens. Entranced by the magical sight, Tiara Rose thanks him. Aquasteed gently gathers a strand of her hair in his fingers and smiles, telling her that he is glad she enjoyed the evening. As Tiara Rose meets his gaze, she feels herself slowly falling in love with him. The following day, Alexander and Heartmites share a meal together. Alexander reveals that he is aware Heartmites disobeyed his orders and visited Akari, and he asks whether the visit yielded anything of value. Heartmites answers stiffly, admitting that he realized he had believed Akari too easily and should have listened to Tiara Rose instead. Alexander tells him that Tiara Rose had expressed the same sentiment. He explains that he went to see her to apologize for Heartmites' injustice, but she insisted she did not blame Heartmites at all. She even admitted that she should have communicated with him more openly. Heartmites is filled with regret as memories of his time with Tiara Rose resurface. He recalls how often she scolded him while they were growing up. Alexander gently reasons that Tiara Rose did so because she genuinely cared for the kingdom and for him, the person who would eventually wear the crown. Heartmites finally admits that he understands this now, realizing too late that Tiara Rose had always been loyal to him and that he repaid that loyalty by trampling over it. Alexander reminds him that no matter how deeply he regrets his actions, the engagement to Tiara Rose has already been dissolved. Meanwhile, Tiara Rose asks Fellini for advice on which dress she should wear for her date with Aquasteed. Fellini smiles warmly, noting how happy and excited Tiara Rose looks for her first date. That observation makes Tiara Rose realize that this truly is her first date. She sits before the mirror as Fellini fixes her hair with an ornate coral hairpiece. Fellini explains that it comes from Aquasteed's homeland and suggests that wearing it might please him. It isn't long before Aquasteed's carriage arrives. Tiara Rose lets her feet carry her forward, her heart fluttering as she goes to meet him. During the ride, she chats easily with Aquasteed until they arrive at a breathtaking flower field. They settle beneath a tree for a quiet picnic, where Tiara Rose proudly presents a basket of baked goods she prepared herself. Aquasteed gratefully accepts one of the sweets and, after tasting it, admits that it is delicious. His praise makes Tiara Rose beam. She tells him how much she loves eating and baking sweets, explaining that the sweets she brought are her favorites, especially when paired with tea, cocoa, and various other drinks. She even confesses that once, while reading a novel, she accidentally ate an entire basket by herself. The incident had caused her to get scolded by her maid. Aquasteed chuckles at her story, finding her quirks utterly endearing. Listening to her talk feels so natural that he thinks he would do so forever. He reaches for another sweet, and after eating it, he picks one more and gently offers it to Tiara Rose. Though nervous, she allows him to feed her. He then slips an arm around her waist and asks if he may call her Tiara as a nickname. When she gives her permission, his face lights up, and he insists that she call him Aqua in return. And she is even more startled when Aquasteed pulls her into a hug. As he shares how happy he is, Tiara Rose becomes flustered by her racing heart, but she slowly calms when she hears Aquasteed's own heartbeat also drumming madly. She pulls back and hides her face in her hands. Aquasteed laughs softly and apologizes, teasing that she looked as though she had been waiting for a kiss. He quickly adds that he wants to take things slowly before going any further. To ease the moment, he asks if she would feed him a cookie. She agrees, carefully choosing one he hasn't tried yet. After tasting it, he remarks that her sweets have a gentle, comforting flavor. causing her to turn away to hide her blush. His gaze then falls on her hair ornament because of their position, and he asks aloud if wearing it means he has a chance with her. Tiara Rose turns back and gives him a warm, sincere smile. Taking that as his answer, Aquastide leans against her. Though Tiara Rose still worries about the uncertainty of her future, she allows herself to savor this small moment of happiness. When she returns home, she tells her father that she wishes to accept Aquastide's proposal. Though Shanaz admits it pains him to see her go, he agrees, saying her happiness matters more than anything else. Before long, Tiara Rose finds herself at Aquastide's castle, where she meets his attendant, Elliot. As Elliot escorts her to Aquastide, they chat about their respective countries, particularly the accessories each kingdom is known for. Suddenly, Heart Knights appears, freezing in shock when he sees her. Realizing she is there to visit Aquastide, he lowers his gaze. He bows deeply and apologizes for his actions at the graduation party. Fixing him with a stern look, she reminds him that royalty should not bow so easily. Heart Knights smiles faintly, remarking that Tiara Rose has always been the one to keep him in check. He thanks her for everything. Seeing the gentleness in his expression, Tiara Rose feels relieved. She realizes that Heart Knights truly understands now, and that at his core he is not a bad person. As he steps closer, about to reach for her, she is suddenly pulled into Aquastide's embrace. Aquastide fixes Heart Knights with a sharp glare and calmly asks what he intends to do with Tiara Rose. Before Aquastide ever took an interest in Tiara Rose, he had transferred to Lapis Lazuli Academy to complete his studies. Prior to that, he spent years traveling the world to broaden his knowledge. As he walked through the academy halls, he quickly became the center of attention for many of the female students. He even entertained them slightly by smiling their way. Elliot was quick to point out his popularity one day. Catching up to him, Elliot remarked that it had only been a few days since his arrival, yet Aquastide had already gained a sizable fan club that seemed to be growing in size each day. Aquastide chose to ignore the attention and instead asked Elliot about the book he had requested. Elliot confirmed that there were several copies available in the library, and the two of them headed there together. Along the way, Elliot casually asked if Aquastide had found a suitable bride, mentioning that Aquastide had already received numerous invitations, all of which he had declined. Aquastide simply replied that his current priority was gaining as much knowledge as possible. Once inside the library, Aquastide caught sight of Tiara Rose through the window outside. For some reason he couldn't explain, watching her smile to herself made his heart race. He recognized her because that was not actually the first time he had noticed her. He remembered meeting her at the welcoming party held in his honor. It was there that he had also met Heart Knights, who introduced Tiara Rose as his fiancé. Even then, Aquastide had noticed how strikingly beautiful Tiara Rose was, as well as how diligently she had refined her etiquette and manners. She already carried herself as someone fit to stand beside a future ruler. Since that day, he began noticing her more often in the halls, always composed and mindful of her duties, lending a hand to fellow students. He found comfort in knowing there was someone else as dedicated as he was, working toward the same goal of one day being worthy of the crown. What truly captured his attention, however, were the small, unguarded moments. Whenever she was served sweets or when a scene in one of her novels moved her, her expressions would change in the most genuine and endearing ways. Before he realized it, Aquastide found himself watching her every day from his seat in the library. Elliot eventually noticed. Seeing how Aquastide's gaze always followed Tiara Rose, he realized that Aquastide's frequent visits to the library were no longer for reading, but to quietly watch Tiara Rose from afar. He hinted at his observation to Aquastide, who merely agreed with him. Suddenly, rain began to fall and Tiara Rose and Fellini prepared to leave. Aquastide shocked Elliot that day by using magic to ensure Tiara Rose's spot remained dry so she could continue enjoying her picnic. Elliot made sure to question his use of magic, and Aquastide reasoned that it was to make sure Tiara Rose's book wouldn't get wet. However, he knew the real reason was that he had fallen in love with her. His magic had caused her to smile that day because she had seen a beautiful rainbow, something he had long wanted to do for her. The following days were spent resisting the urge to reach out and hold her. He was in love with her, but because she was Heart Knight's fiancé, he resisted for her sake. Elliot had suggested talking with Tiara Rose, but Aquastide refused, believing it would be unbecoming of him to flirt with another man's fiancé. After that, he settled on praying for her happiness. When he walked into their classroom one day, he was shocked to see Heart Knights hugging a carry right in front of Tiara Rose. Watching Tiara Rose faint that day had been terrifying. He was the first to react immediately. He gathered her in his arms and asked the others to ready the infirmary. He sat by her infirmary bed, wondering what had caused such a strong negative reaction, since Tiara Rose barely showed any weakness. He considered whether it was a Carrie's presence and her sudden closeness to Heart Knights. If that were the case, he mulled over the possibility of Heart Knights leaving Tiara Rose for a carry, since there was a rumor suggesting it might happen. He decided that if that were to happen, he would be the one to come to her rescue. However, just before he could firm his resolve, Heart Knights entered the infirmary and thanked him for watching over Tiara Rose while he was away. Heart Knights took his seat by her bedside, making Aquasteed realize that it was Heart Knight's duty to stay by her side, not his. He left them alone and looked down at his hands. That had been the first time he had ever held the girl he loved. He realized that tomorrow would mark the end of his time at the academy as they were set to graduate. However, during the graduation ball, he witnessed Heart Knights not only ridicule Tiara Rose, but also call off his engagement with her. Fury welled up inside him, and he almost let his magic run wild that evening. He quickly calmed himself, and after paying his respects to the king, he stepped between Tiara Rose and Heart Knights, commanding him to stop. He had finally made up his mind to take action and to take what he wanted instead of gazing at Tiara Rose from afar. He proposed to her then and there. After the party, he wrote to his father and had Elliot send the message through magic. The letter transformed into a bird meant to deliver his message as quickly and safely as possible. The letter informed his father that he would be bringing Tiara Rose to his kingdom as his fiancé. Elliot admitted that he had been worried about Aquasteed, but seeing that he had finally taken a fiancé, he felt he could rest at ease, even if the proposal was rushed and dramatic. Eventually, Tiara Rose agreed to his proposal. At present, Elliot informs him that Tiara Rose has arrived to visit him. The fact that she had come all this way to see him fills him with excitement, though Elliot reminds him that he still has a mountain of paperwork to finish before he can meet her. Once he finishes with his paperwork, he hurries through the halls in search of her, only to see Heart Knights speaking to her in a familiar manner. He observes them for a bit, slightly put off that Heart Knights can speak to her as if nothing had happened. As Heart Knights reaches out to touch her, Aquasteed pulls Tiara Rose close to himself, demanding to know what Heart Knights intends to do with her and firmly reminding him that Tiara Rose is now his fiancée. Tiara Rose's heart swells at being called his fiancée, and the two embrace in greeting. Aquasteed then turns his attention back to Heart Knights, who is frozen in shock at how quickly their engagement has been made official. He hadn't been informed and thought he could still make amends with Tiara Rose. Realizing he had nearly acted out of line, Heart Knights bows an apology, and Aquasteed decides to overlook his actions. Aquasteed thanks Tiara Rose for coming all that way and leads her off to show her around the castle, leaving Heart Knights behind in regret over his loss. As they walk the castle grounds, Tiara Rose tries to tell him something, but Aquasteed stops her, telling her there is no need to explain, as he will always be there to protect her. Hearing him call her his fiancée makes Tiara Rose's heart bloom with affection. Aquasteed cups both of her hands and thanks her for accepting his proposal. In turn, she expresses her gratitude to him for saving her and loving her. When they arrive at the Rose Garden, Tiara Rose is thrilled by the sight of the beautiful tea party laid out just for them. She begins to feel as though she is dreaming, being able to enjoy such a perfect day with Aquasteed. It is then that she recalls how strawberries are a specialty of the Marin Forest Kingdom. She stops herself before she can ramble on further, realizing that she has been thinking about her past life again. Aquasteed doesn't seem to mind in the slightest and encourages her to eat as much as she wants. They enjoy the spread together, and after Tiara Rose finishes a plate of food, Elliot formally reintroduces himself as Aquasteed's attendant. He tells Tiara Rose and Fellini that he doesn't have a last name because he isn't a noble, but he has served Aquasteed for a very long time. Fellini bows politely and introduces herself as a maid who serves Tiara Rose's family, explaining that she had been appointed as Tiara Rose's personal maid just the year before. Tiara Rose adds that Fellini had actually grown up with her and that she views her as an older sister. Fellini then announces that she wishes to continue serving Tiara Rose for the foreseeable future. Even if Tiara Rose were to remain in Marin Forest, Fellini wishes to follow her and stay by her side. The day is spent with the four of them enjoying one another's company, and Tiara Rose finds herself overwhelmed with happiness. Meanwhile, Akari is bored out of her mind as she remains confined to her room under detention. She complains to herself that Heart Knights hasn't even come to visit her and fumes over the fact that Tiara Rose is still around. She admits that she has also fallen in love with Aquasteed and believes that she deserves him because she is the heroine of this world. An idea suddenly comes to her, and she smiles to herself. Back with Tiara Rose, the tea party has just come to an end when Aquasteed leads her to a more secluded area of the garden. Once they are seated, he gently pulls her closer and admits that he wants some private time with her. He apologizes for having forced his proposal on her before and tells her that he wants to ask her again properly. Cupping her face with both hands, he repeats his proposal. This time, Tiara Rose accepts without even a moment of hesitation. Overcome with joy, Aquasteed pulls her into a tight embrace and confesses that he is in love with her. He pulls back slightly so they can kiss properly, marking Tiara Rose's first kiss. Her heart swells with happiness as Aquastea peppers her face with affectionate kisses, finally ending with one more kiss on her lips. He hugs her once more and apologizes for kissing her despite having promised to wait. Though she feels embarrassed, Tiara Rose decides to savor the moment, realizing that she has never felt happier. She melts into his hug, not wanting this moment to end. Suddenly, they are interrupted when a brilliant light erupts somewhere within the castle grounds. Even Heart Knights can see it from inside the castle. Guards and attendants rush toward Aquastea and Tiara Rose, trying to determine the source of the light. Aquastea wonders if it's some sort of magic because he has never seen something like this occur. Tiara Rose immediately recognizes it as the heroine's magic called the Holy Prayer. The spell is incredibly powerful, capable of cleansing lands of impurities, corruption, and ailments that could cause a kingdom's downfall. Tiara Rose had almost forgotten about the spell, as Akari had never used it before. When the light finally fades, Elliot takes several guards with him to investigate the area. Meanwhile, Tiara Rose is advised to remain by Aquastea's side. Fellini tries to reassure her that she has nothing to worry about, and Tiara Rose shakily agrees, though worry clouds her mind. Her thoughts linger on the spell. She knows that every kingdom in this world seeks the power of holy prayer, which is why Akari is the central figure of the story. A quiet worry settles in her heart that Aquastea might one day desire that power as well, and that would cause him to leave her. Though she does not voice her fears, Aquastea gently reassures her, promising that he will always protect her. After the strange light, Aquastea and Tiara Rose sit together having tea while awaiting further news about the incident. Tiara Rose is deeply worried about what might happen once Aquastea learns about the Holy Prayer. She fears that now that they are moving into the events of the sequel, Akari might be the one destined to stand by Aquastea's side after all. Soon, a guard approaches them and reports that the strange light was caused by malfunctioning magical equipment. Fellini sighs in relief, grateful that the incident isn't anything serious. Aquastea offers to escort Tiara Rose home himself. Tiara Rose accepts his offer, but inwardly she wishes she could stay by his side, since she is worried about how the game's events might unfold from here. Later that evening, Elliot visits Aquastea in his study. He informs Aquastea that Akari has recently awakened the ability to use the Holy Prayer. The revelation shocks Aquastea as Akari is the last person he would have expected to possess such power. Elliot acknowledges how dangerous this situation is, since nearly every nation covets the Holy Prayer. According to legend, the power is strong enough to bring peace to the Housing Kingdom. Aquastea recognizes this reality, even noting that many kingdoms would do anything to secure the Holy Prayer, including arranging marriages to ensure it remains within their royal bloodline. Elliot predicts that the Lapis Lazuli Kingdom will likely pressure Heart Knights to marry Akari. However, Aquastea admits that he too wants that power for Marin Forest, and that means he wants Akari as well. 10 days have passed since the light incident, yet Tiara Rose's unease has not faded. No official news has been released regarding the Holy Prayer. Tiara Rose knows that Schnoz might have information, but she doesn't want to trouble him by asking. What troubles her even more is that she hasn't seen Aquastea since that day. She fears that news of the Holy Prayer has already reached him, and that his feelings or plans may have changed because of it. Fellini approaches her and tells her that they can depart from Marin Forest Kingdom at any time. She reassures Tiara Rose that wherever she goes, Fellini will follow and continue to serve her. Meanwhile, Akari is still under house arrest and growing increasingly bored while waiting for Aquastea to come rescue her. She had believed that after revealing her power, he would come for her much sooner, yet 2 weeks have already passed. Suddenly, a knock sounds at her door. The next day, Tiara Rose prepares sweets for Aquastea, knowing that he will be visiting her today. As she delicately decorates her pie, she reassures herself that everything is fine, especially since Schnoz has not mentioned anything concerning it. After finishing her preparations, she hopes that Aquastea will enjoy the pies and tarts she made for him. When he arrives, he immediately apologizes for being so busy lately. They sit together for tea and snacks, and Aquastea tells her that preparations for an engagement have been finalized. But when he mentions Akari's name in the same breath, Tiara Rose freezes in shock. Fear grips her heart as she worries that history is repeating itself and that Akari will once again take Aquastea away from her. Aquastea then reveals that Akari is now formally engaged to Heart Knights. Tiara Rose suddenly bursts into tears as she admits that she had been terrified Aquastea was going to marry Akari instead. Aquastea looks genuinely surprised, then gently reassures her that Tiara Rose is the only woman he wishes to take as his wife. Seeing her tears, he leans in to kiss them away before capturing her lips in a tender kiss. When he pulls back, he tells her that his intention is to bring her back with him to Marin Forest. To seal his promise, he kisses her deeply once more, and for a moment, all of Tiara Rose's worries fade. Later that night, as Tiara Rose sleeps, a sudden brilliant light fills her room. She wakes up, startled by its intensity, and sees Akari materialize before her. Akari asks calmly whether Tiara Rose used to be a player of the game. Tiara Rose is stunned, realizing that Akari also knows this world is based on a game. In that moment, she understands that Akari must be another reincarnated player. Akari explains that she had suspected Tiara Rose was a player because she was the only one who behaved differently from the original story. She then blames Tiara Rose for the disastrous ending. Tiara Rose tries to feign ignorance, pretending she doesn't understand what Akari means, but Akari easily sees through her. Akari continues, admitting that her original plan had simply been to secure her happy ending with Heart Knights. However, when Aquasteed, her favorite character from the sequel, suddenly appeared, she changed her mind and decided she wanted to marry him instead. She then accuses Tiara Rose of knowing nothing about the sequel or its adorable heroine. Realizing she has been exposed, Tiara Rose finally admits that she was reincarnated. She explains that she remembers clearing the first game, but nothing beyond that. Akari realizes that Tiara Rose must have died before the sequel was released. Akari begins speaking in a rush as she describes the sequel as the greatest thing she has ever experienced. She then explains that the heroine of the sequel is Isilla, the daughter of a duke, and recounts how Isilla's love story with Aquasteed began. After a moment, Akari reminds Tiara Rose that she possesses the Holy Prayer. Confident, Akari declares that Aquasteed must want her because of that power. She then coldly asks Tiara Rose to break off her engagement with him. Tiara Rose refuses immediately. Akari's expression twists in irritation. She insists that she deserves Aquasteed more because she played the game countless times. Tiara Rose firmly counters that Aquasteed is not just a game character here. Akari merely gives a wicked grin. She raises her hand and releases a small burst of magic. A thin cut appears on Tiara Rose's cheek. With a chilling tone, Akari remarks that she just imagined a scenario where Tiara Rose is injured and forced to call off her engagement. Tiara Rose instinctively backs away in fear. Akari tells her to calm down, claiming she only intends to put her to sleep until she secures her happy ending. Akari unleashes a powerful thunder spell, but before it can strike, a bright protective barrier surrounds her, deflecting the attack. Then familiar arms wrap around Tiara Rose from behind. Aquasteed holds her tightly, relief clear in his voice as he admits he is grateful he arrived in time. Akari stares at him in disbelief as Aquasteed glances at the cut on Tiara Rose's cheek, his expression darkening with guilt. He apologizes for failing to protect her sooner. Suddenly, Shanaz bursts into the room demanding to know what is happening. Aquasteed turns his gaze on Akari and demands an explanation. Desperate, Akari tries to twist the situation in her favor. She claims she is being forced to marry Heart Knights because of her holy prayer and insists she does not want this fate. She begs Aquasteed to save her by taking her to Marin Forest. Shanaz grows furious, accusing Akari of bringing nothing but pain to Tiara Rose. Akari, however, presses on, insisting that Aquasteed should take her instead because her power would bring prosperity to his kingdom. Tiara Rose clings to Aquasteed, her heart aching with uncertainty. Aquasteed acknowledges that the holy prayer could indeed benefit Marin Forest, but he firmly declares that his kingdom can prosper without Akari's power. Gently, he lifts Tiara Rose into his arms. In a clear, unwavering voice, he states that Tiara Rose is the only woman he wants as his wife. Akari collapses to her knees, unable to accept that she has lost. Moments later, guards arrive and bind her in magical restraints before leading her away. Even after confirming that Tiara Rose is physically safe, Aquasteed continues to carry her, telling her that after everything she endured, she is allowed to rely on him more. Tiara Rose buries her face against his chest, snuggling closer and softly thanking him for saving her. The next day, Akari is relocated to a remote manor. Her new room is sealed with powerful magic that restricts her abilities, allowing only minor spells, nowhere near enough for her to escape. For a moment, she wishes this were a game where a prince would come to save her. But as she reflects, she bitterly realizes that this is a game, yet nothing is going her way. Suddenly, she hears a knock, and Heart Knights enters. She rises from her seat and approaches him with a cheerful smile, urging him to stay and have tea with her. Although he's clearly hesitant, he eventually agrees and sits across from her. Heart Knight speaks first, informing her that the two of them will be getting married. Akari immediately agrees without hesitation. This catches Heart Knights off guard. He had assumed Akari also harbored romantic feelings for Aquasteed. In truth, Akari does love both of them. If she could, she would keep them both. But aloud, she simply repeats that Heart Knights is the one she loves. Her words visibly ease his heart. They finish their tea together, and he leaves soon after, leaving Akari to her thoughts. Meanwhile, Tiara Rose is preparing to depart for Marin Forest. Standing before her parents, she and Aquastide formally bid them goodbye, promising to keep each other happy. When attendants announce that the carriage is ready, Tiara Rose lingers just a little longer. She reassures her parents that she will return briefly after completing her bridal training. Then she embraces her mother, cherishing the last moments she will have with them before beginning her new life. Shanaz formally requests that Fellini continue serving Tiara Rose, a role Fellini gladly accepts without hesitation. Taking Aquastide's hand, Tiara Rose steps into the carriage beside him. As the vehicle begins to move, she hesitantly asks whether fairies truly exist in his kingdom. Aquastide smiles confidently and assures her that they do, and that the fairies will surely bless her. Tiara Rose is happy, but lowers her gaze and steels herself. Deciding she wants to try being just a little more demanding with him, she leans closer. But her nerves betray her before she can act further. Aquastide only finds this endearing. But before their moment can deepen, a shimmering magical letter suddenly materializes in front of them. Aquastide notices it is a letter from Akari, so he decides to take it first. Akari has written that she is giving up on pursuing Aquastide and has resolved to find happiness with Heartmites instead. He hands the letter to Tiara Rose, deeming it safe for her. Tiara Rose notices that at the bottom there are Japanese characters. They warn that the sequel's heroine will appear and Akari will be furious if Tiara Rose loses to her. She asks Aquastide if she may keep the letter, explaining that she wants to reread it whenever she feels uncertain or discouraged. With quiet determination, she thinks to herself that she will not lose, especially not to a girl she hasn't even met yet. High above, two unknown figures watch the carriage from the sky, silently observing its journey toward Marin Forest. During their journey toward Marine Forest, Tiara Rose grows unusually quiet. Noticing this, Aquastide gently asks if something is troubling her. To ease his concern, she admits that she will likely miss her home during her bridal training, but the thought that he will be by her side makes her feel at peace. Aquastide smiles at her sincerely. Taking her hand, he promises that he will give her anything she desires, though he teases that he might not be willing to let her return home if she ever asks. Before long, they reach the border between kingdoms. On the lapis lazuli side, the boundary is adorned with elegant roses. On the Marine Forest side, shimmering bubbles drift through the air. Tiara Rose gazes around in awe before Aquastide directs her attention toward the coastline beside them. When she finally looks upon the vast ocean for the first time, her breath catches. The endless blue horizon fills her with excitement for the life she is about to begin. Deciding to take advantage of the moment, they stop by the beach so Tiara Rose can get a better look at the sea. As Tiara Rose steps closer to the water, several sea fairies suddenly leap from the waves, greeting Aquastide and Elliot with lively voices. Both men greet them warmly in return, clearly familiar with their playful nature. Tiara Rose watches the exchange with longing. She quietly voices that she wishes to be friends with fairies as well. Hearing this, Fellini gently encourages her to approach them. Gathering her courage, Tiara Rose steps forward and offers a polite greeting, but to her surprise, the sea fairies respond coldly and dismissively. Seeing her crestfallen expression, Aquastide and Fellini quickly reassure her that sea fairies are notoriously fickle and difficult to impress at first. Yet in the next moment, the fairies notice Fellini and their attitude changes instantly. They swarm around her in delight, stating that they like her. Fellini tries to insist that Tiara Rose is the one deserving of their warmth. Though Tiara Rose insists that she is fine in truth, she feels a little hurt that the fairies do not like her. Aquastide reassures her that she will have plenty of time to earn their affection, and teasingly adds that he is actually relieved they did not take to her too strongly. Otherwise, they might try to take her away from him. Suddenly, Aishura emerges from the water and begins playing with the sea fairies. When Aquastide says her name, Tiara Rose remembers that she is the heroine of the sequel that Akari mentioned. Aishura and Aquastide exchange pleasantries, seemingly already familiar with each other. Aquastide then introduces Tiara Rose as his fiancé. Tiara Rose greets her politely, and Aquastide explains that Aishura comes from the ducal family that oversees the ocean. He adds that she often assists him with his duties. As they talk, Tiara Rose cannot shake her unease. She wonders if she will once again become the villainess in the sequel, especially since her very presence has already altered the story. Feeling overwhelmed, she excuses herself, saying she is a bit tired and heads toward the carriage. However, instead of getting in, she stops beneath a nearby tree in the woods. She tries to calm herself so she can return with a brighter expression, but her worries continue to cloud her thoughts. Then she hears gentle voices and forest fairies appear before her. Unlike the sea fairies, they immediately take a liking to her and even offer her their blessings. Elliot, who had been watching from a distance, approaches in surprise and remarks that this is extraordinary, since forest fairies are famously the most distrustful of humans. When Tiara Rose notices him, Elliot admits that he followed her to stand guard in case something were to happen. She tells him that she is fine now and only wanted to stretch her legs after the long carriage ride. The forest fairies gather around her again, insisting that she eat a blessed flower to lift her spirits. They force it into her mouth, and to her surprise, the flower is sweet. She smiles, and the fairies rejoice at seeing her happy. She and Elliot return to the shore, and Aquasteed lightly scolds her for wandering off, asking her to bring him along next time so he won't worry. Fellini urges Tiara Rose to eat a snack, but she declines, deciding to continue the journey instead. She resolves that rather than fearing the heroine, she should focus on all the people who support her. When they arrive at the castle, they rest in the holding room. Aquasteed informs her that she will have a welcome party in 3 days and that he has already arranged a dress for her. Tiara Rose responds with delight at the news, touched that Aquasteed had a dress specially prepared for her. Seeing her smile, Aquasteed cannot help but pepper her face with affectionate kisses, confessing that he feels impatient knowing they must wait a full year before they can marry. He continues to complain because he badly wants her as his wife. Tiara Rose reminds him to be patient, explaining that bridal training is necessary so she can become a capable partner who can properly stand by his side since he will be king someday. They share a kiss, reaffirming their promise of a future together. The day of Tiara Rose's welcome party arrives and Fellini prepares her hair. However, Fellini wonders what they should use as a proper hair accessory. They feel it needs to be something that makes a statement. Some handmaids approach with hand-picked roses of different colors, and Tiara Rose immediately feels that any of them would make a beautiful headpiece. Still, she asks whether there is a deep blue rose available, explaining that she wants one to match Aquasteed's hair color. The maids say that such a rose does not bloom at this time of year, but then something magical happens. The roses suddenly turn blue, and the maids recognize this as the work of the forest fairies. They remark that Tiara Rose may be one of the very few humans ever blessed by them. In fact, she might be the only one in the current era. Fellini selects several of the blue roses and carefully arranges them in Tiara Rose's hair. Soon, the party begins. Aquasteed and Tiara Rose take to the ballroom floor and dance together to mark their engagement. Everyone watches since this is the first time they get to see Aquasteed's chosen fiancé. When the music ends, they are met with warm applause from all the guests in attendance. Aquasteed comments on how beautiful she looks, mentioning that the blue roses give him the illusion that she already belongs to him. Tiara Rose smiles and softly replies that she already does. They then make their way to the king and queen Sotiris and Lavina, where Tiara Rose properly introduces herself, hoping that they will bless their engagement. Both Sotiris and Lavina eagerly welcome her, pleased that their son has chosen a beautiful and polite lady who is willing to stand by his side and support him. Returning to the party, they are met by Aishira, who congratulates them on their engagement. She kindly offers her friendship in hopes of growing close to Tiara Rose and invites her to visit her manor sometime. Tiara Rose is surprised by her generosity, while Aquasteed explains that Aishira's mansion is located by the ocean and is very beautiful, believing that Tiara Rose would be happy to visit such a place. Seeing no ill intent, Tiara Rose accepts the offer and promises to visit one day. The two girls hold hands, though inwardly, Tiara Rose feels a little hesitant about becoming too close to Aishira. A few days later, Tiara Rose travels toward Aishira's manor. Her newly appointed personal knight, Tarmo, escorts her and checks to make sure she is comfortable. They arrive at the estate where Aishira meets her at the gate and offers to show her the garden first. When they reach the fountain, Tiara Rose is surprised to see unusual fish swimming inside it. Aishira explains that they are rare creatures and that the fountain is filled with seawater rather than fresh water. As Aishira continues to explain, Tiara Rose cannot help but feel that she truly embodies the role of the sequel's heroine, since her background is clearly rich. They then move toward the shore for tea, and Tiara Rose is captivated by the sight of the ocean. Aishira invites her to step into the water, explaining that her magic allows people to breathe underwater and prevents their clothes from getting soaked. Tiara Rose is amazed by the extent of her power, a clear reminder of just how blessed the heroine of the sequel truly is. She begins to worry if she even stands a chance against Aishira, since she herself has no magic. Aishira then speaks about how she learned that Aquasteed and Tiara Rose had met at school, which makes her happy because it means the two of them will be marrying out of love rather than a forced engagement. This puzzles Tiara Rose because she had assumed that Aishira might also be in love with Aquasteed. To test the waters, she tries to inquire about Aishira's romantic endeavors, but Aishira tells her that she has entrusted her engagement to her father since she feels satisfied as long as she can remain with the sea. Tiara Rose presses further by asking if Aishira has ever been in love. Aishira calmly denies it, stating that she never has. Tiara Rose briefly wonders if Aishira could be lying, but she seems sincere and honest in her demeanor. So when Aishira invites her into the ocean, Tiara Rose eagerly agrees. Aishira casts a blessing over them, surrounding them in a shimmering bubble that amazes Tiara Rose. They then descend beneath the waves, and Tiara Rose is again astonished to see that the fish do not flee from them. Aishura explains that she is in the ocean every day, that the fish already consider her a friend, and that they are eager to make Tiara Rose a friend as well. Watching Aishura move through the water, Tiara Rose cannot help but feel as though she is beside a sea goddess. She then notices the coral around them, and the two begin talking about how Marine Forest crafts beautiful accessories from it. As Tiara Rose marvels at the underwater world, Aishura announces that she will return to the surface first to prepare more tea. She insists that Tiara Rose stay behind and enjoy the ocean a little longer. Tiara Rose decides to follow her advice and finds herself grateful for the chance to spend the day beneath the sea. When she finally swims back up, she looks toward the shore and sees Aquasteed and Aishura speaking together. Then Aquasteed leans in, looking as if he might kiss her. Before anything happens, Tiara Rose dives back down, her chest tightening as she thinks this must be the pull of the game, since she is the character trying to fight the events. However, she does not want to lose Aquasteed, even if it goes against the game's story. Resolving to be braver with her feelings, she rises to the surface again. Aquasteed spots her and tells her that he came to pick her up, but he is surprised when Tiara Rose suddenly grabs his hand and asks him not to leave her alone again. Finding her unexpected possessiveness endearing, Aquasteed pulls her into a firm embrace, calling her adorable, while Aishura watches with a blushing face. On another day, Tarmo shows Tiara Rose around the castle. As they walk, they catch sight of Aquasteed and Aishura speaking together in the garden. To ease her worries, Tarmo assures her that they are merely discussing official matters as usual. Tiara Rose remains a little suspicious, since they are talking on the terrace instead of in the office, but when she notices the papers tucked into Aishura's arms, she relaxes as it truly seems like official business. Tarmo then brings her to the garden, where the forest fairies immediately gather around her once they notice her. She offers them cookies, delighted as they happily nibble on her baking. The fairies then lead her toward a large glowing rose, which transforms into a door when she approaches. They tell her that the Forest Fairy King lies just beyond it. Following them inside, Tiara Rose finds herself standing in a beautiful forest castle, suddenly facing Keith, the Forest Fairy King. Upon realizing she is standing before Keith, Tiara Rose bows respectfully, and the two exchange polite greetings. Keith studies her quietly for a moment before telling her that her soul is unusual. He explains that it feels unstable yet carries a sweet fragrance. Taking steps toward her makes Tiara Rose increasingly nervous. She awkwardly suggests that the sweetness might be from the sweets she brought with her. Keith tells her to address him by his name rather than his title, which makes Tiara Rose privately think he is somewhat egotistical. He picks up one of the cookies and tastes it, quickly noticing that it contains traces of Tiara Rose's magic. When he tells her it is delicious, she is about to thank him but accidentally calls him King, prompting him to correct her. Keith explains that among fairies, they prefer to call one another by name. Tiara Rose comments that she envies that way of living and wishes she could live as freely as a fairy. This causes Keith to suspect that something is weighing on her heart. She admits that humans are bound by many responsibilities and expectations, unlike fairies who seem to live without such restraints. Sensing her unease, Keith gently places a hand on her head and tells her that whenever she feels burdened, she may come to him. Meanwhile, back in the human realm, Isilla and Aquasteed are finishing their meeting. The two exchange polite words, thanking each other for their continued cooperation. Elliot remarks on how unusual it is for Isilla to visit the castle so frequently, and even more surprising that many of her visits now concern Aquasteed's personal matters. It is revealed that Aquasteed had designed a hairpiece for Tiara Rose and sought Isilla's advice, hoping to commission her assistance in crafting it. Isilla lightly comments that she feels a little jealous of Tiara Rose for having someone so devoted to her. Before their conversation can continue, Tarmo enters with a serious expression. Back in the realm of the forest fairies, Keith grows curious about Aquasteed and asks Tiara Rose to describe him. She speaks of Aquasteed as a kind and steadfast man, deeply supported by his kingdom. As she talks, she suddenly realizes how much time has passed and hurriedly asks Keith where the exit portal is. Keith smirks and steps closer, pulling her gently toward him. And in the next instant, they are transported directly into Tiara Rose's room. Aquasteed bursts into her room in search of her. He immediately draws his sword and points it at Keith, not realizing that he is the Fairy King. When Keith casually remarks that he might have been the better match for Tiara Rose, she quickly calls him by his title in order to scold him for making the situation more complicated. The moment Aquasteed hears that Keith is the Fairy King, he kneels at once in apology. However, when he rises, he pulls Tiara Rose protectively against him and firmly states that she is his rightful fiancé and that Keith should respect their bond. Keith finds the display amusing and lightly teases that Tiara Rose has a very devoted fiancé. Before leaving, he takes her hand and places a light kiss upon it. telling her that she may call for him whenever life becomes difficult, then disappears. Aquasteed immediately lifts Tiara Rose into his arms and carries her toward the coach. He explains that Tarmo informed him that the forest fairies had taken her away. Tiara Rose attempts to apologize, but Aquasteed gently reassures her that he is not angry. However, he lightly bites her ear and admits that he is feeling a little frustrated and jealous, murmuring that she always addresses him by his title. Tiara Rose then realizes that she had called Keith by name without hesitation. She wonders if Aquasteed would prefer her to drop his title as well. Carefully, she tries saying his name. The moment he hears his own name fall from her lips, all of Aquasteed's frustration melts away. The next day, Tiara Rose completes her lessons and receives high praise from her instructor. When Aquasteed enters, the instructor eagerly informs him of how diligently Tiara Rose has been performing her bridal training. Aquasteed praises her warmly before asking if she might spend some time with him. They move to the break room where Aquasteed tells her that he would like her to accompany him while he works later. At first, Tiara Rose hesitates, knowing that it is uncommon for a fiancé to observe official duties. However, Aquasteed reassures her that even as his future queen, she will not be heavily involved in state affairs. Still, he wants her to understand the responsibilities he carries. Aquasteed mentions that accompanying him may prove useful in the future, so Tiara Rose decides to follow his plan. Later that evening, Tiara Rose studies late into the night. Fellini brings her tea and gently voices her concern, noting that Tiara Rose has been studying non-stop. However, Tiara Rose reassures her that it is necessary if she wishes to become a queen worthy of standing beside Aquasteed. As she gazes into her teacup, she reflects on what she witnessed in the office earlier. Isilla had been there again. Only now does Tiara Rose realize how frequently Isilla visits the castle, although most of those visits are work-related. The next day, Tiara Rose decides to bake sweets for him. As if sensing her intentions, the forest fairies flutter in to visit her. They bring nuts, berries, and flowers from the forest, insisting that she use them in her baking. Tiara Rose gently places a petal into Fellini's mouth, surprising her with how light and sweet the flower tastes. She explains that the flowers gifted by the forest fairies are edible. Inspired, she bakes a cake and decorates it with the berries and blossoms they provided. Aquasteed immediately thanks her warmly and suggests they pause their discussion to enjoy the dessert she prepared. Slices are served to Aquasteed and Isilla. After taking a bite, both offer genuine compliments on its flavor. Even Elliot, seated at a separate table with Fellini, expresses his delight. Just then, another cake is wheeled into the room, this one lavishly garnished with rich cream and strawberries. Isilla explains that the cake is from her. Her family's chef has created a new recipe, and since Tiara Rose has been spending more time in the office, she wanted to offer it as a gift. She hadn't expected Tiara Rose to bring a cake as well. Tiara Rose quickly insists that it is perfectly fine and praises how beautiful Isilla's cake looks, saying that having two cakes is hardly a problem. Without hesitation, she takes a bite, delighting in the fluffy sweetness. Aquasteed watches her fondly, admitting that he could watch her like this forever. Elliot also comments on how rich the flavor of the second cake is and asks Aquasteed which one he prefers. Aquasteed takes a moment to consider his answer. Before he can respond, Heath suddenly appears, casually eating his own slice and remarks that Tiara Rose's cake is obviously better. Aquasteed is startled by his sudden presence and irritation sparks when he sees Keith pat Tiara Rose on the head. He firmly reminds Keith that he had already requested that he refrain from touching her. Keith merely hums in thought before disappearing once again. Later that evening, Aquasteed is eating another slice of the cake Tiara Rose baked. Elliot questions him, since Aquasteed normally does not care much for sweets. Aquasteed admits that he likes Tiara Rose's sweets, which prompts Elliot to lecture him that Aquasteed should have simply said that earlier. However, Aquasteed explains that he must also be mindful of Isilla's feelings. Elliot then recalls that the condition of the sea is closely tied to Isilla's mood. If her mood turns sour, the sea grows restless. But as long as she remains content, the ocean continues to bless the kingdom with its bounty. Aquasteed finishes his slice and asks for another. Meanwhile, Tiara Rose awakens from sleep, remembering a special promotional video that was released shortly before she died. It had teased a scene from the sequel game, showing Aquasteed drenched after falling into the ocean. She recalls thinking he looked handsome in that scene, but quickly scolds herself. That moment had belonged to Isilla in the game's storyline. She cannot allow those two to share such an event in reality. The very next day, Aquasteed informs her that he plans to inspect the ocean later with Isilla. Tiara Rose's mood instantly falters, though she attempts to mask her unease. Aquasteed notices immediately. He steps closer and gently presses a finger against her lips, telling her he will not stop until she speaks honestly. Unable to hold back any longer, she asks him not to go into the ocean with Isilla. To her surprise, he agrees without hesitation. He tells her he will have Elliot handle the inspection instead, since her feelings matter more to him. Relieved, she smiles at how deeply he values her and rises to hug him. A little later, they inform Isilla of the change in plans. Since Elliot is still with the Knights, they decide to pick him up before proceeding with the ocean inspection. Aquaseed invites Tiara Rose to accompany them, mentioning that he would like to show her the rose garden located nearby. When they enter the garden, both girls are instantly smitten by the roses in full bloom. Aquaseed tells them they are free to pick whichever roses they would like to keep. Isilla becomes excited when she spots pristine white roses blooming high on a tall bush. Wanting to pick some for Tiara Rose, she reaches up, but her footing slips and she begins to fall backward. Without hesitation, Aquaseed grabs her to keep her from falling into the fountain. In doing so, however, he loses his own balance and ends up in the water instead. As he sits soaked in the fountain while both girls stare at him in shock, Tiara Rose feels her heart drop. The image mirrors the promotional video from the sequel game, even if the setting is different. Overcome with anxiety, she turns and runs. By the time she reaches her room, tears have begun to fall. She tilts her face upward, hoping they will dry more quickly. Suddenly, a hand covers her eyes. Startled, she spins around to find Keith standing behind her. With a teasing smile, he asks if Aquaseed has made her cry. Tiara Rose quickly denies it, her voice sharper than usual. Keith knows she is lying. He pulls her gently into his arms and transports them to the fairy realm. There, he conjures a soft bed and pushes her down onto it, commenting that it is obvious she has been lacking sleep. The forest fairies flutter around her immediately, tucking a blanket over her. Tiara Rose protests weakly, insisting she can sleep in her own room. However, Keith lightly casts a spell and she drifts off almost instantly. Keith frowns slightly since the spell worked faster than he expected. He studies her sleeping form, reflecting on how strangely attached the forest fairies have grown to her. At the same time, he is well aware that the sea fairies behave the same way toward Isilla. He recalls an incident from centuries ago when Isilla had once fallen into deep distress. In response, the sea fairies turned the ocean red and caused the coral reefs to wither away. Meanwhile, the castle is placed on high alert as Tiara Rose cannot be found. Aquaseed and Elliot eventually make their way to the dungeon where an old royal library is kept. Aquaseed enters alone and scans ancient texts, hoping to find a way into the forest fairy realm. He discovers a mention that access may be tied to the queen's chamber, a detail that confuses him. Suddenly, Keith appears behind him. Aquaseed turns sharply, demanding to know why he abducted Tiara Rose. Keith offers him an easy smile, reminding him how spontaneous forest fairies can be. Then, with unsettling calm, he announces that he intends to keep Tiara Rose. Aquaseed lunges forward to seize him, but Keith vanishes, leaving him standing alone. After the encounter with Keith, Aquaseed and Elliot find themselves standing before a massive painting of a forest believed to serve as the entrance to the forest fairy domain. As Aquaseed begins activating the hidden portal, Elliot quietly observes him. He can clearly see how deeply worried Aquaseed is for Tiara Rose, and as his attendant, he resolves to support him. Once inside, they step onto a magical path stretching endlessly ahead. As Aquaseed presses forward, distracted by his growing concern, he accidentally steps on a vine. Instantly, sharp thorns lash out toward them. Aquaseed recognizes it as one of Keith's traps. Determined, he pushes ahead despite Elliot's visible concern over his recklessness. Another trap is triggered. This time, trees begin to block their path, and vines begin attacking them. Both Aquaseed and Elliot react immediately. Aquaseed raises his hand and summons a powerful wind spell, forcing the trees aside and clearing a passage. With the path open once more, he moves ahead without hesitation. Meanwhile, Tiara Rose slowly stirs awake. She blinks and smiles faintly upon seeing several forest fairies hovering in front of her. It takes her a moment to remember that she had been brought to the forest fairy realm against her will. She softly calls out for Keith, but the fairies inform her that he has stepped out for a while. Instead, they eagerly invite her to play with them. Tiara Rose politely declines, explaining that she wishes to return to the castle. However, the forest fairies persist and begin offering her various fruits in an attempt to convince her to stay. She graciously accepts a few pieces. When it becomes too much, she gently refuses the rest, thanking them warmly. Once she feels the mood is softened, she tries again. She asks if they know how she might return home, promising that she will play with them another time. The fairies lead her through a door that opens into a grand hall, and another door leads her to an immaculate kitchen. Tiara Rose stares at it in surprise since it does not seem like something fairies would need. The fairies proudly explain that Keith had prepared the kitchen especially for her, which makes her recall how much he seemed to enjoy the cake she baked the other day. The forest fairies begin showing Tiara Rose jars filled with flowers and nuts, eagerly describing the different flavors each one holds. She carefully picks up a small pink blossom and nibbles on it. To her surprise, it is wonderfully sweet. She learns that the pink flowers are sweet, the blue ones are salty, and the red ones are spicy. After their little lesson, the forest fairies eagerly asked Tiara Rose to bake sweets for them again. She hesitates, torn between indulging them and returning to Aquastide. The fairies immediately grow upset and begin pleading with her, promising that they will show her the way home once she finishes baking. Their small faces brighten as they rush to bring out baking tools and ingredients. Tiara Rose decides to comply, realizing they likely will not guide her back unless she agrees. She begins mixing the unfamiliar ingredients. The fairies eagerly toss pink flowers into her bowl. Though slightly doubtful, she reassures herself that the pink ones are mild and sweet, so it should be fine. For a brief moment, she considers asking Keith for the spices in the kitchen, but quickly dismisses the thought. It feels strange to ask for a favor from someone who essentially kidnapped her. After some time, she finishes a batch of cupcakes and garnishes them delicately with pink flowers. The fairies cheer, nibbling happily at them as they guide Tiara Rose toward what they claim is the exit. She smiles when she sees a grand door standing before her, convinced it will lead her back to the castle. However, when she opens it, she steps into an empty throne room instead. Her gaze lingers on the throne, and she cannot shake the lonely atmosphere that fills the space. Thinking of Aquastide, she tells the fairies that she truly must return to him. The last time he saw her, she had been with Keith, and she knew he must be worried. In his place, she realizes she would feel jealous too if she found him alone with another woman. The fairies are confused by the name Aquastide and ask Tiara Rose if that is the name of the person she loves. She confirms that Aquastide is the one who holds her heart. As she says it aloud, she suddenly feels how deeply she misses him. She knows his love for her is genuine, yet a quiet fear lingers over the game's events. She is startled when Keith suddenly appears behind her and holds her hands. Before she can pull away, he lifts her effortlessly into a bridal carry and brings her toward the throne. He calmly asks if she truly wishes to return to the castle. Tiara Rose immediately demands that he take her back. She tries to reason with him, explaining that Aquastide must be worried about her disappearance. If she remains here, she will only become a burden to him. From Keith's perspective, Tiara Rose staying in the forest fairy realm would benefit everyone. The forest fairies adore her, and keeping them happy will mean they will continue to bless the kingdom. He tells her to simply wait because Aquastide has already arrived. Not even a second later, the grand doors swing open. Aquastide steps inside, and his eyes immediately land on Tiara Rose seated on Keith's lap. His expression hardens as he fixes Keith with a cold stare and demands that he return Tiara Rose at once. Keith merely smirks and asks what Aquastide intends to do if he refuses. In response, Aquastide unsheathes his sword, his voice steady as he declares that he will take Tiara Rose back by force. Tiara Rose watches in alarm. A human king and a fairy king should not be fighting over her. She calls out for Aquastide to stop, but he does not seem to hear her. His focus remains locked on Keith. Keith scoffs and claims that Aquastide does not even love Tiara Rose since he could have any other woman he desires. Aquastide answers firmly that he wants Tiara Rose. Keith counters by revealing that Tiara Rose has been uneasy, and that Aquastide is the cause of that unease. Though taken aback, Aquastide still demands that Keith release her. Tiara Rose also begs Keith to stop, but he simply tells her not to interfere in a man's battle. In the next instant, Keith vanishes from the throne and reappears directly in front of Aquastide. Keith taunts Aquastide once more, asking if he truly believes he can defeat a fairy king. With firm resolve, Aquastide begins swinging his sword at Keith. Keith effortlessly dodges each strike, casually remarking that for a human, Aquastide is exceptionally strong. Aquastide refuses to slow down, declaring that strength is essential, especially for someone who will one day become king. Keith finds himself recalling that past human kings were also skilled in martial arts. When Aquastide brings his blade down in a powerful arc, Keith blocks the strike with a wooden fan and pushes him back. Keith then announces that he will begin going on the offensive. He flicks his fan and releases a spell toward Aquastide. Though Aquastide narrowly dodges it, the magic slams into the wall behind him, breaking it and revealing the breathtaking sight beyond. Keith calmly confirms that he resides at the peak so he can overlook Marine Forest Kingdom. Tiara Rose senses that he is subtly telling them he is protecting the kingdom. Keith warns Aquastide to be careful not to fall, but Aquastide responds by enchanting his sword with water magic. Before attacking, Aquastide briefly glances at Tiara Rose to ensure she is far enough away to avoid being caught in the spell's force. Seeing that she is at a safe distance, he unleashes a series of water-infused strikes, though Keith continues to block them with ease. Switching tactics, Aquastide casts a wind spell to propel himself into the air and close the distance. Yet once again, Keith blocks the assault with his fan. Tiara Rose watches helplessly, wishing with all her heart that both men will emerge from this battle unharmed. Keith forces Aquastide back again. This time, Aquastide staggers, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. As they prepare to cast another set of spells at each other, Tiara Rose decides she cannot stand by any longer and rushes forward to stop them. But the force knocks Tiara Rose toward the opening in the castle wall, and she begins to fall. Aquaseed does not hesitate. He immediately jumps after Tiara Rose, summoning wind magic to increase his speed. When he finally reaches her, he wraps his body tightly around hers. Relief floods his expression as he begins apologizing for making her feel uneasy, but Tiara Rose tearfully apologizes as well, admitting that she had been jealous of Isilla. Aquaseed freezes for a moment, surprised by her confession. Then, without thinking, he begins kissing her, apologizing for feeling strangely happy. With one final kiss pressed firmly to her lips, he tells her to hold on tightly as they approach the ground. Tiara Rose clings to him without hesitation, placing her full trust in his strength. Aquaseed calls out to the Sky Fairies, asking for the power needed to protect them both. High above, the Sky Fairy King Krail watches the scene unfold. He already finds the situation troublesome, especially since Aquaseed has chosen to clash with Keith, yet he cannot ignore Aquaseed's determination. Krail grants his blessing, and a surge of magic envelops them as the wind shifts, guiding their bodies upright. Feeling the divine support around him, Aquaseed thanks the Sky Fairies. He then commands the winds to form wings. Together, he and Tiara Rose hover in the air, gazing down at the breathtaking view of the Marine Forest Kingdom. Taking in the sight before her, Tiara Rose feels a renewed resolve to protect this kingdom alongside Aquaseed. She wipes away her tears and promises to work even harder by his side. Eventually, they return to Keith. What follows is nearly an hour of Tiara Rose lecturing both men. Though they apologize and promise to be more considerate moving forward, it quickly becomes clear to her that her words have not fully sunk in, especially when she and Elliot watch the two begin arguing over how her time should be divided between them. Sighing, Tiara Rose sits down and wonders how she can possibly make two kings get along. Just then, the forest fairies flutter toward her, offering sweets. One of them carries the final cupcake she baked. An idea sparks in her mind, and she gently breaks the cupcake in half and offers one piece to each man. She explains that she wishes to stand beside Aquaseed in ruling and protecting the kingdom, but she also wants to continue working with the forest fairies and Keith to maintain its prosperity. Neither Aquaseed nor Keith seems fully satisfied. Keith rests a hand on her head, only for Aquaseed to quickly swat away. Aquaseed picks up the flower garnish from his half and tells Tiara Rose to rule by his side. He offers it to her and she opens her mouth, allowing him to feed her. Not to be outdone, Keith does the same, promising that he will continue working with her as well. To her surprise, the flowers taste even sweeter than before. As she watches the two kings eat the cupcake she had baked, one of the fairies remarks that it looks as though Tiara Rose is the true king, not the two men before her. The realization makes her freeze and she rises from the throne, giving them a worried look, but both Aquaseed and Keith only laugh, clearly amused. Keith, in particular, finds himself unexpectedly looking forward to this new collaboration. Meanwhile, along the coastline, Isilla stands quietly, watching the waves roll in and out. After one full year of bridal training, Tiara Rose finally returns home. Following the formal announcement of her arrival, she immediately runs toward Iltiana and throws her arms around her. The two embrace tightly, unable to hide their excitement at being reunited. Shanaz stands nearby, clearly holding back tears. Noticing this, Aquaseed gently offers him some wine for later. Their reunion is suddenly interrupted when a maid rushes into the hall breathless, announcing that they have unexpected visitors. The group is surprised to learn that Heart Knight and Akari have arrived to see Tiara Rose. Tiara Rose and her family exchange confused glances, unable to understand the reason for their visit. Shaz quickly instructs the maid to turn them away, but Tiara Rose steps forward and asks him to reconsider. She requests the chance to speak with Akari personally. She remembers the note Akari once sent her and realizes she still has questions left unanswered. With a sincere expression, she pleads with her father to grant her this opportunity. Shanaz sighs heavily but eventually agrees on the condition that Aquaseed remains by her side during the meeting. Aquaseed calmly invites Tiara Rose to head toward the meeting room, though she apologizes softly for being demanding. When they finally meet Akari, both parties exchange polite greetings. Akari excitedly rambles about her new life, sharing how she is now working alongside Heart Knight toward what she calls their happy ending. After calming herself, she warmly congratulates Tiara Rose and Aquaseed on their upcoming wedding. Her eyes sparkle with genuine delight, and Tiara Rose can tell she is relieved that she did not lose to Isilla. Once seated, Akari eagerly asks about Tiara Rose's year of training, particularly whether the sea fairies have caused her any trouble. When Tiara Rose admits that the sea fairies still do not favor her, Akari produces a small box and presents her with a pair of earrings. Akari explains that she infused them with her holy prayer so they act as a protective charm. She deliberately chose those colors because she believes Tiara Rose should wear the color of the person she loves. With a proud smile, Akari then shows her own yellow gemstone earring, the same shade as Heart Knight's hair. Akari admits that things between her and Heart Knight are still a little awkward, but lately he has been especially adorable, and she finds herself loving him more each day. Tiara Rose shyly asks Aquasteed if it would be alright for her to wear the earrings. He assures her that he has no objections, but he cannot hide his surprise that she and Akari have become friendly. The two girls briefly recall that they were once enemies. However, Akari boldly declares that they are now partners against the heroine. Aquasteed looks confused, clearly unaware of the game they are referring to. He gently presses a finger to her lips and teasingly warns that there will be consequences if she keeps him in the dark for too long. Akari groans and comments that flirting is fine, but she would appreciate it if they did not do it in front of her. Still, she quickly brightens and sincerely tells Tiara Rose that she hopes she finds true happiness. After Akari departs, Tiara Rose spends precious time with her family before preparing to leave once more. She thanks her parents from the bottom of her heart. She feels as though she owes them the world for raising her into the woman she has become. As she leaves, her mother smiles warmly, already looking forward to seeing her again on her wedding day in Marine Forest. On the evening before her wedding, Tiara Rose sits at her vanity with Fellini, who is crying tears of joy over the long-awaited marriage. Suddenly, a knock echoes through the room, startling them both. Fellini goes to check the door while Tiara Rose wonders uneasily if it could possibly be Isilla. Moments later, Fellini returns and confirms her suspicion that Isilla is at the door. Tiara Rose invites her in and entertains her at the small coffee table in her room. Isilla calmly explains that she has come only to congratulate her on the upcoming wedding. Though polite, Tiara Rose cannot shake her unease. Noticing her guarded expression, Isilla gently asks if Tiara Rose believes she is in love with Aquasteed. She goes on to explain that she does not fully understand love and has always trusted her father's decision to choose someone for her to care for one day. A wave of guilt washes over Tiara Rose. If not for her involvement, Isilla might have been the one standing beside Aquasteed. She knows she is technically stealing her true love away from Isilla. She opens her mouth to apologize, but before she can speak, Akari announces her arrival and enters from the balcony. Akari immediately congratulates Tiara Rose before turning to Isilla and introducing herself. Akari studies her for a moment, commenting that for a heroine, she does not seem very happy at all. Tiara Rose quickly pulls Akari aside to scold her for being insensitive. In response, Akari explains that she was simply curious about what the heroine was truly like. Isilla, who has been quietly observing their exchange, remarks that Tiara Rose and Akari appear to be close friends. Akari immediately brightens and proudly declares that she is indeed one of Tiara Rose's closest friends. She then adds that she had been worried about Tiara Rose and suddenly accuses Isilla of constantly lingering around Aquasteed. Tiara Rose attempts to scold Akari again for her rudeness, but both girls are caught off guard when Isilla unexpectedly apologizes for being inconsiderate of Tiara Rose's feelings. Tiara Rose immediately moves to her side to comfort her while also firmly reprimanding Akari for her behavior. At that moment, Fellini enters the room and informs Tiara Rose that Aquasteed will be arriving soon. Realizing she may have overstayed her welcome, Isilla apologizes once more and takes her leave. As she departs, Tiara Rose notices that the sash around Isilla's dress is a deep shade of blue, strikingly similar to Aquasteed's hair. Later, Akari and Tiara Rose step out onto the balcony. There, Akari admits that she came because she was curious about how the sequel would end. Tiara Rose asks what she means, but before she can press further, Akari uses her magic to teleport away from the castle. The next day, it is the day of Aquasteed and Tiara Rose's wedding. Isilla makes her way there as well in a carriage. Her thoughts drift back to Akari's words. She tries to convince herself that she never intended to come between Aquasteed and Tiara Rose. She tells herself that she feels no romantic love for Aquasteed, only deep admiration for his character. Yet as she thinks of him, her heart tightens unexpectedly. Before she realizes it, she finds herself standing in front of the Grand Cathedral. Meanwhile, in her room, Tiara Rose anxiously examines herself, worrying over every detail of her appearance. Fellini gently reassures her that she looks absolutely beautiful. As they prepare to enter the ceremony, Tiara Rose finds her thoughts drifting back to Akari's words. She cannot help but wonder if Akari had been hinting at a major story event occurring during the wedding, since it seems likely due to the nature of the game. She forces herself to focus, since she must walk down the aisle with confidence. Inside the grand chapel of the castle, the audience waits eagerly for the long-anticipated entrance of Aquasteed and Tiara Rose. Aquasteed smiles gently at her. Both of them are wearing the protective earrings Akari had gifted, a reminder that they are choosing each other. Among the guests, Isilla feels her heart tighten painfully. She is startled by the intensity of the negative emotions swelling within her. Her thoughts are consumed by Aquastide, and in that overwhelming moment, she realizes she has harbored feelings for him all along. Before she can move further, Akari grabs her wrist and firmly tells her not to do what she is about to do. Isilla slowly sinks back into her seat and asks in a trembling voice if the ache in her chest means that she loves Aquastide. Akari studies her carefully. She had anticipated this moment since she played the game. In the original story, the love interest would marry someone else only for Isilla to interrupt the ceremony. To unlock that event, the heroine had to wear the colors of the man she loved as a ribbon. Akari quietly admits that she usually enjoys dramatic wedding interruptions, especially when the groom chooses his true love over his bride. But this time is different. This time she wants Tiara Rose to have her happy ending. Suddenly, Keith reveals himself beside them, echoing her sentiment. He warns Isilla not to disrupt the ceremony, as he too wishes for Tiara Rose's happiness. Isilla promises she will not interfere. Forcing herself to watch, she faces the altar, but the sight of Aquastide about to wed another woman shatters her composure, and tears begin to stream down her face. Though she tries to muffle her sobs, Tiara Rose hears the faint sound of crying and instinctively scans the room. Her eyes land on Isilla, and in that instant, she understands that Isilla truly loved Aquastide. Beside her, Aquastide also notices Isilla's tears, and his eyes widen in surprise. A chill runs through Tiara Rose. She had been so focused on potential events before the ceremony that she never considered she might lose him on the wedding day itself. She calls out his name in fear. Aquastide's gaze immediately shifts to hers, and in that moment, clarity returns to him. Seeing the worry in her eyes, he softly apologizes for causing her distress. Then, without hesitation, he lifts her into his arms in a bridal carry and strides toward where Isilla is seated. Aquastide kneels before Isilla, Tiara Rose still safely cradled in his arms. He thanks Isilla sincerely for attending their wedding. Then he apologizes. Though he does not elaborate, Isilla understands his meaning. With a small, bittersweet smile, she admits that she did admire him, but she has now moved past those feelings. She tells Aquastide that he is free to live happily with Tiara Rose as his bride. As he rises and carries Tiara Rose back to the front of the chapel, Isilla quietly thanks him for teaching her what love feels like. With the tension resolved, the ceremony resumes. Aquastide carefully slides the ring onto Tiara Rose's finger. In return, she leans forward and presses a tender kiss to his forehead. They seal their vows with a kiss, promising to remain by each other's side and to cherish one another always. Suddenly, shimmering lights cascade from above, filling the chapel with a radiant glow. Keith's booming voice echoes through the hall, declaring that he blesses their union and vows his protection, support, and peace upon the kingdom of Marine Forest. As the newlyweds step outside, they are greeted by cheers and a shower of falling petals. Keith grumbles lightly about how he still wishes Tiara Rose were his, earning a teasing scold from Akari, since Aquastide would surely be mad if he hurt him. Smiling despite himself, Keith transforms the drifting petals into glowing orbs of light, offering another blessing upon their marriage. Aquastide notices Tiara Rose crying once more. She insists they are only tears of joy as they embrace. Relief washes over her since she has reached the game's ending at last and no longer has to fear being at its mercy. Yet far beneath the sea, in her underwater domain, Pearl watches from within her castle. Scoffing, she dismisses love as something foolish. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to see what happens next.